Oh, I'm having some kind of, oh, there we go. It's having some kind of error going live here in StreamYard. Hello, y'all. Welcome to day 2 of building a content strategy in public. Welcome back. Thanks to everyone who joined me yesterday, and I'm really excited to do things again, to do it again. First of all, let me do a quick wrap up from yesterday, and then we'll do or let me do a couple quick uh, action items here. I gotta share this link on LinkedIn and some other places. And then I am going to do a quick recap of the work that we did yesterday. If you're joining live, pop in, say hello. Let me know who's on the stream here in the chat. Let me see. Announcement. Okay, finding. Man, LinkedIn has been really slow for me the last few days. Anybody else notice that? All right. Let me just check my Asana tasks here really quick. Oh, I need to follow up with some folks on the free resource from yesterday. If you didn't, if you joined us yesterday, then you were you saw us working on the buyer persona template. So let me just share my screen here really quick. And we'll talk real quick about that. Yeah. So we shared this buyer persona template yesterday. If you want to grab a copy of this template for your own research purposes, which by the way, I just realized that we didn't really have any chance to iterate on some content ideas. We were so focused on filling in all the bullet points. That's okay. We will obviously come up with ideas later on in the process. Anyway, if you'd like to grab a copy of this template, pop over to LinkedIn. I posted a message yesterday as a recap. You can comment on that thread, and I'll send you the link to get your own copy of this persona template. Cool. So let's talk about today. So once again, real quick recap. So yesterday, what we did, we went through our customer interviews. So prior to this week, I interviewed around 30 content and marketing leaders at different types of companies. So we had transcripts and bullet points from those interviews, which we reviewed together to fill out the buyer persona worksheet that I just shared with you. We focused on their role, their goals, and their worries, which also kind of translates into things like pain points, needs, jobs to be done, different frameworks for sort of understanding your persona. So that's what we filled out in the buyer persona worksheet. Then we did, we had basically 2 buckets, right? So one was kind of our traditional ICP at Optimus, which is a marketing leader at an early stage growth, or growth stage company, let's say, right? So sort of a Series A, Series B startup generally with ambitions to scale much larger. That persona was generally like a marketing leader, a VP of marketing, head of marketing, CMO in some cases. So that was our first persona bucket. We had several interviews with folks that kind of fit into that ICP. And then our second bucket was sort of a new ICP that we were exploring, which is content leaders. So like a head of content, or even sometimes a content marketing manager, etc., at a more a larger stage or a later stage company. So we kind of box that into around 200 to 5,000 employees. It's a pretty broad range, but kind of a mid stage, so sort of beyond sort of your early stage startup, but not quite like truly enterprise for the most part. There's some gray area in there, of course. But the point being, ultimately where we sort of came down yesterday was looking at these 2 different potential ICPs, looking at Optimist as a business and sort of our strengths and weaknesses. We did a SWOT analysis. We ultimately decided that our target ICP for our marketing strategy, really, it made the most sense to focus on that second bucket. So sort of a new persona from who we've targeted traditionally. So rather than focusing on startups and earlier stage companies, focusing on companies that are slightly more established, focusing on targeting kind of content leaders within those companies, and helping them, as sort of a team that provides support for, research and strategy and planning. Also, writing, design, editing, all the content creation pieces of it, analysis, reporting. We offer kind of the same services that we've always offered as an agency, but
rather than sort of coming in and saying, hey, we are going to be your full content marketing team and we're going to run the entire show, structuring it in a way where we can better integrate with an existing team or a more established content team. So that's what we're focused on today. That's what we focused on yesterday. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to dig into that ICP further, and we're going to be focusing on channels and content. So essentially where we're at, someone says they love me. Thank you, Groovy. So essentially where we're at right now is that we're going to be focusing on this research process today, channels, creators, content. So what that means is that we're going to look at the interviews that we did with our ICPs, and we're going to go through a process where we're going to start by understanding what are some of the primary channels that these folks use to stay up to date on content, learn about content marketing, learn about SEO, the topics that are relevant to us. Then we're going to look at specific creators within those channels. So who is creating content in these channels that's resonating with these people. And then finally, we'll be looking at the content itself. So for each of these different creators, what is some of the content that they're creating that is getting the most engagement, seems to resonate the most with the target audience that we're going after, etc. So as you can see here, we're going to start by reviewing channels from the interviews. So we'll dig into that in just a moment. But basically, in the interviews that I conducted, one of the questions that I asked folks was about their sort of consumption habits, what kind of channels they looked at regularly and learned from. We're going to review some of the named creators. So as part of those interviews, they also mentioned, hey, I specifically, read Lenny's newsletter, for instance. And so that gives us kind of a jump start on our research process. We've got some places to explore. But then we're also going to use kind of the social algorithms to our advantage to do some additional research. So supplementing that primary research with some additional exploration through social channels to look at, other people who kind of fit into this ICP bucket, and looking at their activity to help us better understand some of the folks that they may be following as well. That's going to help us also potentially identify. We haven't done it yet, so we'll see what we find. But potentially identify additional creators or brands who also are sort of on the radar for these folks. And then finally, we're going to be kind of again reviewing the individual creators, cataloging some of their best content, the content that gets the most engagement, that kind of thing, and then kind of pulling everything together at the end to kind of generate some insights about, what's the type of content that seems to work best for these different channels and these different or for this ICP on these different channels. And yeah, that will hopefully give us some insights that we'll use later on as we are starting to develop our own content strategy and content ideas. All right, that's where we're at. Let me just do a quick pass here, make sure that we're all set. Hey, Natasha, good to see you. Thanks you all for joining us. Again, if you haven't already, pop in the chat. Let me know again who's with us, and yeah, I'll be answering questions, that kind of thing. So if you want to, if you have any questions for me, or you want me to dive into anything in particular, or want me to touch on anything as I'm going through this, yeah, feel free to pop it into the chat. All right, let's get started. So real quick, let me share today's template. So I mentioned this yesterday. We kind of looked at it. So this is our channel research template. So really quick, pretty straightforward. I think basically it's very similar to kind of the buyer persona template that we used yesterday. There's some slight, obviously we're researching something slightly different, but you can see here there's basically a page for each channel. So we're going to be going kind of channel by channel, reviewing each channel, looking at specific creators, and then identifying specific content. As before, we've got kind of some free space here for content ideas, and then at the bottom here is where we'll kind of try to glean some insights about the content that works best, that seems to resonate, etc. So let's get into it. As I said before, we already kind of processed the interviews that we conducted last week. So we've got some pretty good insights already about some of the channels and content that folks are consuming. And so that's going to give us a huge jumpstart here. This process, would take much longer, obviously, if we're starting from scratch. You might be wondering, by the way, how you would do this process if you didn't conduct those interviews. That was a question we got yesterday. I would recommend that as I said yesterday, I would recommend primary research first and foremost, if at all possible. I think you're going to learn the most from having conversations with your audience. But there are other ways to glean these insights. You can conduct your own survey. Especially things like channel and content like consumption habits are pretty good for a survey, because you don't need like super deep insights. You're just looking for like list some things, or check the different channels that you consume regularly, those types of things. The other thing that you could do would be to use a platform like Winter. If you're not familiar with that, it's Winter with a Y. It's sort of like a customer research platform, basically, and you can do a bunch of different things. You can have you can run like A/B tests on like a landing page, for instance, with your target audience. But you can also just like run a survey. So if you wanted to kind of survey, let's say, director level folks in content marketing, you could potentially use Winter to run that survey and target those people and get that feedback. So I would say, this would be pretty difficult if you're starting from scratch. But once we get to kind of phase 2, you'll see, that there are some kind of tricks that we can use from using the social platforms and the algorithms to kind of help guide the research if we don't have sort of a starting point. But luckily, we have some starting research. So we'll kind of get right into it here. The couple main things that we learned from these interviews. One is the channels that people tend to use in order to learn or consume content about content marketing and SEO. You can see here kind of the primary list. So we've already sort of aggregated the responses from people in the interviews into these bullet points here. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to use these as like our primary channels. So, I'm not going to spend a ton of time like sort of exploring alternative channels as options, just because, again, we already have conducted, some 30 some interviews with folks, and we've got a pretty broad consensus. So we don't, I don't have like tally marks here, but I can tell you from having conducted those interviews that the majority of the people that we talked to had significant overlap, right? So they tended to mention the same channels, and in many cases mentioning the exact same creators. So I feel pretty confident that we've sort of gotten a good picture of the channels that are most important to these to this ICP. And so what we're going to do here is we're just going to let's set up our sheet and we'll get started. So we've got YouTube, podcasts, Slack, or let's just call this communities. I'm not sure if all of these are on Slack or not, so we'll just call it communities. LinkedIn, newsletters, Reddit, and courses. So these are kind of the primary channels. I'm actually just going to focus, I think, on these 5. Courses, I don't think right now we're going to create a course. I think there's a time and a place for that, of course. But for our purposes, pretty low likelihood that we would create something like that for our audience. Reddit is also kind of its own beast. I'm a Redditor. I like Reddit. My experience with Reddit is that you have to. It's very difficult in my experience to sort of target the right folks there. Even the subreddits that seem like they would be relevant, like SEO, for instance, is sort of a dumpster fire. So yeah. Anyway, I'm going to skip Reddit. I'm going to leave Reddit out for this exercise today. That's just my personal choice. So what we're going to focus on are these 5 channels: YouTube, podcast, communities, LinkedIn, newsletters. Let's pop these over here. So LinkedIn, and then we're just going to duplicate this. Podcasts, duplicating again. And I should mention, you may have noticed that YouTube and podcasts were kind of grouped together originally. From the conversations that I had with folks, I got the sense that a lot of the YouTube content that people were consuming were basically like the video versions of podcasts. So, a lot of podcast creators, of course, sort of repurpose their content, and they generally do that by like recording like a video version and then, publishing it as as both a podcast and a video. So I definitely get the sense that I guess I don't know why I'm calling this channel 1, 2, 3, and 4. I should just be calling it by the channel name. But anyway, there's definitely an opportunity here to do some repurposing across these channels. So I'm excited about that. What were our other channels? LinkedIn, communities, and newsletters. Okay. All right. And then one more. Okay. Cool. So we've got kind of our sheet set up here. So let's dig into the research. So now if we flip back here really quick, a couple of things that we can focus in on. So you can see here we've got kind of some specific communities and some specific newsletters that people mentioned that they are reading. And then they mentioned some specific creators that they follow. These were primarily on LinkedIn. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to go drop these into our sheet. So we're going to start with LinkedIn, understanding these creators. Let me just add a bunch of rows in here so I don't spill out of our section here. Okay. Okay, so now we've got a pretty good list of creators that we're going to be digging into on LinkedIn when we get to that part. But before we get there, let me just look back at my sheet here. So we're reviewing channels, viable options. We've done that. Text. We reviewed the name creators and catalog them. Yeah. So let's just finish filling these in really quick. So we've got podcasts, and then we've got YouTube, and then we've got communities. Okay. So for most of these, we have some idea of the specific creators that people are following. So let me just grab these from over here and drop them into the spreadsheet so that we're all kind of set up here. And then we've got communities, same kind of deal. We've got a pretty good sense, or we've got at least some communities to start with. Dang it, it's one row short. All right, so we're gonna drop those in there. Okay, so we've sort of done the first few steps here, which are, basically taking the information from our interviews, kind of compiling it into our sheet. So now what we want to do is we want to do kind of some supplemental research on these. So the first thing that we're going to focus on is LinkedIn. So let me just go back to my sheet really quick, make sure that I'm following my own process here. Strike through. Okay, so we're going to get into some LinkedIn research. So a couple things I'll mention here. I don't want this to be sort of creepy, I guess. So I'm not going to be sort of live stalking people, but I will show you my process using my own profile, right? So here's my profile. So what we're going to basically do here in our research process is we're trying to supplement the list of LinkedIn creators by looking for other folks who fit a similar kind of ICP or fit a similar profile to our ICP, and then looking at their activity to see the types of folks that they interact with, etc. So let me just give you a live example, right? So this is my profile here. So the first thing that we're going to do behind the scenes, basically, we look at the profiles of the people who we interviewed who fit into our ICP bucket. You can use this other similar profiles feature on LinkedIn to see, again, sort of using the LinkedIn algorithm to figure out like who are some of the other people that LinkedIn sees as sort of, peers or other folks in the industry. Not everyone in this list is going to be a one-to-one match, but you can see some of the people who LinkedIn sort of correlates with me personally. And so what I would do here is I would go through this list and I would try to find specific people who fit into the ICP that we're targeting. So in this case, a head of content at at a sort of a mid-sized company, that kind of thing. Uh, so and then I would click into their profile. This person doesn't, I don't think actually fits into that particular ICP, but you get the idea. So I would click into the profile, and then what we're going to do is you can actually see my activity. So this is where, it would be a little creepy for me to do this live. So I'm not going to do it live on anybody else. But you can see my actual activity here on LinkedIn, for better or worse. I don't know if you're aware of this, but people, depending on your settings, people can see, things that you react to, things that you've commented on, all kinds of stuff. So what we're going to do there is, basically, if I were researching myself, what I would be doing is I would be scrolling through my activity feed, and I would be looking for content that I've interacted with. And then I would be looking at the specific creators of that content. So, for instance, I might say, okay, hey, look, this person in my ICP, they interacted with this post from Katie Berg at Clue. So, Katie Berg is maybe a creator who this type of person follows. And so then going back to my sheet, I might add Katie Berg in here as a creator that we're going to want to research later. So again, just to recap the process, basically, we're starting with the channel. So we've identified already that we're researching LinkedIn. The stage that we're at right now is that we're identifying specific creators on LinkedIn who are reaching our target audience, our ICP. And then the final step, or the third step in the process, I should say, is to then look at each of these creators and figure out what kind of content are they creating, and which kinds of content seem to resonate the best. So that's the process. So let me kind of get my screen configured here, and we'll go through the process. So as I said, I'm not gonna live stock people on the stream here, but I will. I will have sort of my side by side view going so that you can see the research here as I'm finding new folks. Let me. Oh, I'm seeing some questions in the chat, so let me just respond to those really quick. Groovy, will this take around 3 hours like yesterday? To be completely honest with you, I don't really know how long it takes. This process will probably take between 2 and 3 hours, or this live stream will probably be between 2 and 3 hours long. So yeah, just to give you a sense. And will I summarize today's video in a LinkedIn post? Yes, I will. I will follow up on today's video with a summary post on LinkedIn where you can kind of get the recap. And of course, you'll also be able to watch the replay of this at any point. Okay, let's get into this process. So again, what I'm going to be doing here. So first of all, I'm going to delete this. I'm actually going to delete a couple of these because we're not really interested for LinkedIn. We're not really interested per se in companies. We're mostly focused on individual creators, just because the nature of the platform. So what I'm going to be doing here, again, kind of behind the scenes, is I've got my LinkedIn screen going over here. I am pulling up other ICPs who I think kind of fit along with our other profiles that fit along with our ICP. And then what I'm doing is I'm looking at their activity on LinkedIn to find specific creators and accounts and things like that who they interact with, who can give us some inspiration later on for the types of content we want to create. So I'm just scrolling through here. One thing I will mention about that is, it can be very hit or miss depending on whose profile you're looking at and what kind of things they do. Sometimes people are not very active on LinkedIn. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is, sometimes people tend to just interact with their coworkers, that kind of thing. So spending some time digging in to these to the activity feed is helpful. But if you're not finding anything, don't be afraid to kind of move on. If that particular person just isn't using LinkedIn as a way to like consume content, because that's not always the case. The other scenario that I run into a lot when I'm doing this kind of ICP in like channel research is, you run into people who just like interact with content about their industry. So they're a content marketer, yes, but they work in, I don't know, the automotive industry or whatever, and they tend to just interact with content about the automotive industry, which can sometimes be valuable, but other times it doesn't kind of align with our vision for the kind of content that we would create because we're not writing about the automotive industry per se, or creating content about it, uh, as it were. All right, so I'm going through the first ICP here. I'm not finding a whole lot of relevant engagement. I'm going to spend about 15 more seconds scrolling here to see if I come across anything. Yeah. Okay. Not finding much on this one. So I'm going to go to the next ICP, or the next profile from my ICP list, I should say. By the way, I realize that this is probably not the most riveting live stream in the world to watch during this part of the process, but I wanted to be cognizant of people's privacy, and again, I just felt a little weird for me to be like sort of live scrolling people's activity on LinkedIn, sort of just normal everyday people, and I didn't want it to be sort of a weird invasion of privacy kind of thing. All right, I'm on to the next one. I'm not finding a whole lot there. Gonna pop over here. The good news is that because we've done these interviews and we've got kind of the baseline uh of relevant like accounts, we've already got a lot of like data to work from, so we don't have to spend uh too much time doing this. If we don't find a bunch of additional accounts to follow, that's fine. I mean, we're not trying to lasso the entire universe here. So yeah, that's sort of the good news, and part of the reason why it's so important to do that upfront research. Mm, Okay, I think I got someone. Let me just pull this person up. Let me just see. Yeah. Okay. I think this is a good one. So I'll go ahead and share this profile, since this is somebody that will be kind of reviewing. They're more of a public figure, less of a like an private individual. I feel less weird about sharing their profile. So basically, again, just to recap what I was doing, behind the scenes, I was researching other LinkedIn profiles that fit in with our ICP. I was looking at their activity on LinkedIn to see who are the other people and brands that they interact with, to try to find examples of other creators that we can research, to help shape our own strategy. I came across this person, Andrew Holland. A couple things stand out to me. One, this person is obviously a creator, right? They are creating content. They've got a newsletter. They're posting every few hours, it looks like, on LinkedIn. So they're creating and posting a lot of content. Secondly, they have a big following, right? So you can see here they have 65,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is pretty massive. So this is a great example of, I think, someone who kind of fits our bill. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add this to our list of channels here. I'm going to keep the link actually because that'll make it easier for me later. I won't have to search for them. Okay, so that's an example of kind of what the workflow looks like, and kind of how we're trying to capture stuff. So I'm gonna keep going down this rabbit hole here for a little bit. I promise I won't spend too much time because I know this is not the most exciting thing. But once we get through this process, then we'll get into, I would say, like the more fun process, which is sort of mining the content that is actually being created, and generating some insights. Mm. Okay, I think I've got another pretty good one. You may be familiar with this person if you're in the content space. I'm actually not sure if she pronounced her name Fio or Fio, or maybe some other way, but yeah, she creates a lot of content in the space. She doesn't have quite as large of a following as Andrew that we just found, But nevertheless, I have seen her posts many times over the years. I don't know her personally, but she seems to create content that really kind of resonates with this audience and with content creators in general, I would say, or content folks, as is per the name of her website or newsletter. Let me keep going here. Uh, yeah. So one thing that I'll mention here is that I am I'm also being selective about the people I want to include here. So let me show you an example of this. Uh, this guy, Jake Ward, you may or may not be familiar with him and his work. The quick context is this is the like SEO heist guy. So basically, he published a big viral post about stealing traffic from other sites using AI and like programmatic content. And then that site, basically got nuked into the ground by Google. This guy is obviously a good content creator. He's built a large following, and I think there's definitely some overlap uh, between this audience and our audience. And in fact, I just found him in the activity feed of one of the people that I'm researching. But I am not going to add him to our list, and the reason why is because I know that his sort of brand of content or his sort of audience is generally seems to be very fascinated by AI and sort of high scale content, which is if we think about our ICP discussion from yesterday, sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum of what we're trying to do at Optimist. And so if I'm learning from the things that he shares, I think it's sort of sending me down the path towards the other ICP. So I'm trying to be sort of cognizant of that, and obviously we may still run into that. Some of the people on my list may also fall into that, and we'll have to sort of curate the content selections that we use as kind of examples. But I just wanted to point that out because I'm not just going through this list and like adding anyone I see who posts content in here. I do want to be a little bit selective because we are trying to kind of learn from we are trying to kind of learn from this content and gain insights from it. But those need to be the right insights. And so if we're learning all about what high velocity SEO people care about, that's different from what content marketing people necessarily care about. Anyway, that's my quick spiel there. Let me get back to my research. Okay. Y'all may have interacted with this person before. Harris, I believe, that's how you pronounce his name. Um, he's another pretty public creator. Shares a lot of content, gets a lot of engagement. I would say again, he does kind of sit, I think, at the intersection between kind of like freelancers and like writers and like content leaders. But I think he creates enough kind of high level content that I think it's worth checking out. Here's of course another good one. So another very public figure in our space is Brendan. Just gonna grab his profile here. Okay, so and then I've got one more. Okay, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and move to the kind of the next stage of this process because I know that this is not particularly exciting to not watch me do the research and then just see the spreadsheet. Um, so let's talk about kind of the next steps in this process, which are focused on uh, looking at the actual content being created by these folks and sort of looking for I think inspiration is really the key thing there. So what we're looking for is examples of sort of their best performing content that we can then learn from uh, and sort of use to extract some insights about the type of content that generally tends to resonate with this audience. So again, I don't feel as strange about sort of publicly stalking some of these folks if they are kind of well-known creators, etc. So let me go ahead and pull up Ross's profile here, and we can learn a little bit from Ross. By the way, shout out to Ross Simmons. We just had him on a live stream a few weeks back. Awesome guy. Always love to learn from him. Okay, so here's what we're doing now. So we're using kind of the same general process. We're looking at the activity from Ross. In this case, we're generally focused on posts. Actually, good question. I'm not 100% sure if videos also appear in posts. So we may have to look at both of these tabs. Oh, and images. Okay. All right. So basically, we're going to go through. We're going to look at his content, and what we're looking for. The first sort of layer of qualification here is we're looking for the posts that basically got kind of the most engagement. So which things were sort of the biggest hits. So I'm scrolling through here. Okay, so just a quick pass. All of these have a decent amount of engagement, but you can see here that this one is sort of an outlier, right? So this one has almost 100 reactions, for instance, whereas the other videos and other posts have closer to 50. So this one has basically 2x the engagement of the other posts. So that's an interesting insight to me, because what that tells me is that there's something about this particular piece of content that maybe resonates at a deeper level, or the structure or the format is maybe better, or there's something about this content um, that we can learn from. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. I should note that. Oh, here, let me show you what I'm doing here. So I'm just pasting that link in here so that we can kind of review that content later, and then we'll kind of distill that into some insights based on what we find in terms of the patterns here. So what I was going to say is, I should say that of course, all content shared via social media is subject to the whims of the algorithm. So hey, maybe there's nothing about this particular content that seemed to that actually made it better, but for some reason the algorithm just seemed to like it. That's possible. But nevertheless, we're looking for the signals here, and we're trying to kind of block out the noise as best we can. Oh, okay. So here's okay. So this is obviously a big one. I'm not sure if he maybe promoted this or what, but I mean, this thing has 8x the engagement of his other posts. So that's an interesting one. I think we definitely want to go ahead and capture that for further analysis later. So one of the interesting insights I would say here right away is, you can see here, there's a bunch of different types of content that he's sharing. He's got LinkedIn newsletter, he's got images, he's got videos, he's got these sort of like tweet screenshots and different things. Interestingly, or maybe not, I guess it's interesting as a takeaway. It seems like so far what we found is that this kind of content, a visual sort of with clear takeaways, right? So not just a visual that says like a thing, but like a visual, almost like a guide, like a visual guide kind of format, seems to be performing outperforming other content. So what we're going to look for now, of course, is like other things to kind of validate that hypothesis. Okay, so here's another example, right? So this one doesn't have as much engagement, but we're still creeping towards 100 engagements or reactions here, and it's kind of fits into that same sort of bucket, right? It's sort of like a visual guide, right? It's like the image is the main piece of content, and in order to get the information, you have to actually read the image. Um, so that's sort of an interesting example. I'm going to go ahead and grab that as well, just because it seems to kind of follow that pattern. Proactivity is superpower. Yeah, so this is also interesting here. This video seems to be outperforming all of his other videos, so worth grabbing that as well to try to see if there's anything we can learn from that. This is an interesting one, right? So this is sort of speaking to, I think, the existential dread of the marketing and creative space. Um, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is interesting. I definitely want to grab that. I think that there's some definitely some insight there about kind of the content that we're creating here. One thing that we'll sort of zoom in on later is that I don't see here is like a clear winner in terms of like format or structure. We talked a little bit about the visual guide kind of format seemed to be performing outperforming a lot of the other posts, but now we're seeing some of these videos, vertical video outperforming some of the other posts. So it seems to be honestly like a decent mix of different types of content, different formats and structures, which is interesting. Yeah, this is another good one. This one had a big response. Gonna grab that. And you can see that's even also its own, kind of another new type of format, which is kind of this long form written story with just sort of a general image, right? You're not really gleaning information from the image just to catch your attention, and then the content itself is the story. So very very interesting there. Okay, so I think we spent probably enough time here stalking Ross. We could definitely pull some more of these as examples, but for now, we've already got a pretty good list here. So let's move to our next person. Let me just first make sure that this person, I'm not super familiar with their work. So let me just make sure that they're also kind of a reasonably public figure before I broadcast their profile here. Huh. I am actually not finding this person, so it may be possible that okay. I think it was a misspelling from the actually I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. So the person that was on our list was Ian Brenner. I'm finding somebody named Ian Bremer who is has a very large following, but they don't really seem to be like relevant to our audience. So I don't know if they were just mentioning them as like somebody that they are interested in or follow or what. But if you're in the chat and you know who this is referring to, Ian Brenner, Ian Bremer, something like that, uh, feel free to let me know. But for now, I'm just going to skip them. Let's go to our next person, which is someone who I am familiar with and who is definitely a very public figure, which is Dave Gerhardt. Not the Dave Gerhardt that works at Yamaha of the United States. Dave Gerhardt, who runs Exit 5. Let's pull up his profile here. Okay, so this is Dave. I'm sure you all are probably familiar with him, but just for quick background, he was like the CMO at Drift and then worked at Privy that was acquired, and now he runs Exit 5, which is like a B2B marketing, kind of course or series of courses or like community or educational community kind of thing. So yeah, let's dive in. So same thing we're gonna do. First, we're gonna kind of get a sense of like what's sort of the average engagement, and then what are some of the outliers. So you can see here, he's pushing 300 engagements on this piece, 100 here. Okay, so yeah, so interestingly, this post about getting engagement on LinkedIn seems to be getting the most engagement. uh, yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. We'll grab that. I think that's a good, a decent example. I mean, you can already see maybe some patterns about why this works. It's a little snarky, which I like. It's also pretty tactical, right? It's telling you like, hey, just do this thing. Follow this kind of pattern to kind of scale this approach or this strategy. So like that. Keep going here. So this is a good one. The want to measure everything and lack of patience often kill any chance of doing good marketing. I can already tell you this is sort of an emotional resonance kind of post, right? Because it's sort of striking to the deep frustration that many marketers feel, which is that sort of the need and a desire to like measure and quantify everything that they do uh, makes it really hard to do big things or do sort of exciting work because everything is being measured. There's no room for sort of risk or error. So yeah, I can definitely tell. Yeah, something like that is sort of an emotional resonance play, which again sort of speaks to the pain point, which is maybe another interesting thing. Actually, I should probably start identifying some of these insights as we're going through this. Otherwise, I'll probably forget them. So, um, yeah, let's talk about this. So, some of the insights that we can glean from this is that like I think the key here is that there's sort of this emotional resonance, but it comes not from like here's how to do a thing or here's how to do whatever. It's like it's sort of like hitting someone in the chest with the specific pain that they're experiencing, right? So like your boss won't let you do anything exciting because all they care about is measuring and attributing all of your day-to-day work, right, or something like that. And so the point being is that it's sort of very real, it's literal, and it sort of has like a visceral component where you're sort of speaking to that pain point rather than just like sort of speaking to like an outcome, right? I think we tend to sell the benefits and not the features, which I think is generally the right approach. But in some cases, we actually want to focus in on the future or the pain point as it works. That's what people tend to feel most acutely. And so I think there's an interesting insight there, which is that that kind of content where you're just saying like, hey, here's exactly what you're experiencing. It sucks. I know what it is, rather than leading with, "Hey, I'm going to save you," right? I'm going to help you, be better or whatever. So sort of flipping that script a little bit, I think is valuable, especially on social channels. Let's keep scrolling here. We won't spend too much time on each of these moving forward. Oh well, here you go. I mean, look, this is the same topic, sort of remixed in a different way. And you can see here, this thing was gangbusters, 2,700. So again, basically, he's sort of speaking to the pain of these folks in around the same topic. There's maybe there's maybe another insight here, which is sort of thematic remixing. So again, if we look at this post versus the last post that we measured, Dave is basically saying the same thing in two different ways. So he's sort of experimenting, sort of taking like the core concept or the core idea, and he's kind of remixing it in a new way. But he's obviously like operating on kind of a core theme around, marketing or measuring marketing being a barrier, uh, as it were. Um, Gonna spend a couple more seconds here just scrolling really quick, and then we'll flip to the next person. Any other bangers here that we should take note of? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, so here's another one. Again, I like I love this. So, David sort of speaking again, to a pain point, which is like, oh God, another person commenting on your thing with like a very AI generated comment. He sort of doing it in a very snarky and like funny Dave way. So I love that as an example as well. I'm gonna grab that one. Okay, let's move to the next person. Next person. Again, I'm fairly confident I know who this person. Yeah. Okay. Let me just pull up their profile here. All right. So next person we're looking at is Chris Walker. Again, you may know him. He runs an agency called Refine Labs. So let's get right into his content and see what we can learn. Okay, so you can definitely see, first of all, he's leaning heavily into video. His engagement numbers are pretty high on average, right? So we're in the kind of 5 to 600 range. So I'm trying to see if there's anything that's like which are high, right? So keeping in mind that I'm not discounting them. Obviously, they have resonated with a lot of people. But what I'm looking for again are sort of the outliers for this particular account. So is there one of these that got a significantly higher amount of engagement than all of the others? Honestly, so far I'm not finding any that sort of stick out as like outliers. Let me just keep scrolling here and see if I can find any. If I can't, then what I'll do is I'll go back. Maybe in this case, he just doesn't have any that are outliers per se. Um, it's funny. You can definitely see like his following growing because like as we're back here, 4 months back, his engagement numbers are like sort of the averages are getting lower and lower. Um, okay, so this is probably a good example here, maybe. So this is um yeah, so this is a good example because this is still kind of within the average of where we started. But as you can see here, the other posts around this are in like the 1, 2, 300 range for the most part. And so this one was sort of an outlier at the time. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that as a post. What's he talking about here? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's kind of talking about like, aligning, sales and marketing and customer success and all these different teams and channels, which I think is interesting. Let me see if I can find any other. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So this is interesting. I think speaks to some pain points on both sides of the aisle here. On the one hand, you've got kind of an age. I'm sure Chris has like a pretty big uh, following of agencies and like freelancers and other like kind of service, people on the service side. And then I'm sure he's also got like the client side in-house teams. And so this is sort of a frustration I think that kind of cuts both ways, right? As an agency, you're like, hey, you're spending all this money on stuff that's not working. Why can't you, divert that budget to me as an agency, and I'm going to be able to help you much more effectively. And then in-house, you feel the same thing, right? Hey, my boss for some reason won't approve, the $5,000 we need to do our job 10 times more effectively, but he'll spend $1 million on ads or whatever, right? So, um, a good sort of pain point post there. The other thing that I'll mention real quick before we move off of Chris, we're also seeing again, there doesn't seem to be one particular format or post type or structure or anything that really outperforms on LinkedIn, as far as I can tell so far. It seems like it's a mix of these long form written posts, a mix of video, a mix of sort of graphic or like visual guides. So the cool thing about that is that gives us a lot of options to kind of remix different content in different ways, and it is sort of helpful. So I'm just going to jot that down here. really quick. So I already mentioned, the emotional resonance, the thematic remixing, and then the other thing I'm gonna mention here is that like uh, multiple content formats. So one of the things that I'll mention here really quick because I'm starting to think I'm already seeing sort of a vision for how this kind of gets applied to our content strategy. And what I'm seeing here is that we've got this idea of like thematic remixing. So let's say I want to talk about uh, I don't know, the state of SEO, right? Something more specific than that, but the state of SEO is my topic. I can thematically remix that. So I can take that and say, hey, SEO is difficult. And then I can say, here's what we're seeing in SEO and why it's getting more challenging. And then I can say, here are some tips and some ideas about how to approach SEO given all the changes, right? So I'm sort of remixing the central topic in three different ways. But then beyond that, I can also mix and match it into different formats. So I can take those three thematic remixes and I can uh, create three different formats of essentially the same idea or the same angle on that topic. So that gives me 9 different like pieces of content that I could potentially create. Each of those has sort of roughly equal value in terms of like potential performance and engagement. So what I'm seeing, my point being that LinkedIn, I think is the strategy around LinkedIn is likely heavily predicated on effectively remixing and repurposing the content to kind of maximize your shots on goal, if you will. Sorry, I went down that rabbit hole there and got kind of distracted. Video, image, text, multiple content formats work well, I guess is the actual insight there. Okay, so let's we're gonna go to the next ICP here, or the next creator, who is Justin Welsh. Again, someone very well known who I'm sure you all have seen, if not follow personally. So yeah, Justin Welsh is sort of an interesting figure in this mix because I would say he's not sort of explicitly a content marketing person per se. He's more of like a build your social audience and your personal brand kind of person. But I think a lot of people glean helpful advice from his content because, again, as we discussed yesterday, talking about our ICPs, I think people are thinking about a lot of different channels, different formats, repurposing, sort of diversifying their content strategy. And so one of those I think is figuring out social, basically, which Justin has obviously done. All right, same thing we're going to do here. We're going to go through, we're going to look for outlier, or we're going to kind of get a sense of like what's the average and then start looking for outliers. Okay, so yeah, right away you can see here, first of all, Justin seems to be following a very, a very formulaic pattern in his content. You can see basically everything is kind of the same thing. Very short, punchy intro with like the colon hook, and then the screenshot from Twitter. So he's obviously got a very systematic approach to content creation based on sort of repurposing this content from LinkedIn, or I'm sorry, from Twitter, to publish it on LinkedIn. Anyway, the takeaway, the main thing that I was going to mention here is that there is an outlier here, which is this post. So you can see, we were at like the 15, 16, 1700 engagements. This one's 3200, so 2x at least. Yeah, I guess this is sort of like it's interesting. No shade to Justin, but this is sort of I would consider this kind of like a platitude sandwich, right? It's like he's just sort of taking like the basic advice and kind of piling a bunch of the sort of conventional wisdom, I guess, on top of each other, which I guess is valuable. Yeah, that's sort of an inspirational kind of nudge. Again, no shade to Justin Welsh. And I know he's a big time creator and does a lot of great work. So I got nothing against him. Let's see. Control really his biggest flex. Yeah, so I mean, I would sort of categorize Justin Welsh as sort of in kind of the hustle hustle culture, if you will. You know, you might call him a hustle bro. A lot of his content is very platitude and inspirational, uh, but not particularly tactical or actionable, right? So a lot of it's like, hey, just go do the thing. Hey, just like get your financial freedom. That's all you should care about. You know, those types of topics, which obviously resonate with a lot of folks. I will say that, you know, as I talked about before, you know, Justin Walsh is kind of sits at the intersection of a couple of different communities and audiences. I think he does tend to resonate pretty heavily with, you know, kind of solopreneurs, bootstrappers, freelancers, people like that who are just kind of trying to build their own personal brand, and probably less so with like our core audience of like in-house marketers. That being said, there's a lot to learn from people who are just good at the channel, right? So even if it's not, you know, the content itself is not particularly well aligned with our audience, I think that there's a lot to learn about, you know, sort of the strategy and the approach and the format and those types of things. Hmm, it's interesting. So he actually used a screenshot of somebody else's tweet. I guess that's one way to give credit, at least, you know, better than just sort of ripping someone's content off. Uh, okay, I think we probably spent enough time on Justin Welsh here. I did see one back here that seemed to be an outlier, so I'm gonna grab it. Where was it? Yeah, I guess it's this one. Well, this is sort of a remix of the topic that we just talked about, which was, you know, kind of financial freedom kind of thing. Okay, let's go to the next person. Once again, I'm gonna kind of pull them up behind the scenes here real quick, make sure I'm getting the right person, etc. Did I mean Marcus Frick? All right, I'm not finding this person, or at least if I am finding them, they're, you know, very very broad and not really in sort of the content or like marketing space directly. So I'm gonna skip them. Uh, the next person I am gonna pull up here is our friend at Superpath, Jimmy Daly. What's up, Jimmy? Let's do a quick pass through his content. Obviously, he's got a strong audience here as well of folks in the content marketing and kind of SEO space. Same approach here. Going to do a quick pass, look for some outliers. Yeah, one thing that we, you know, again, we want to be a little bit selective here. We want to curate our selections a little bit. Obviously, Jimmy is kind of a little bit like me. He has sort of a blended audience, right? So he's got freelancers and, you know, kind of individual contributors, but he's also interacting with marketing and content leaders. So, you know, that means that his, you know, the content that he publishes is, you know, likely to speak to one or the other, sometimes both, but often, you know, probably targeted at one or the other. So want to be thoughtful about who we're which sort of content we're grabbing here. Really cool new opportunity. Yeah, so like this is a great example, right? So you know, this is an outlier for Jimmy's post. It's a job post, right? So it's about a role that's open. Not, you know, that wouldn't make sense, or we would be sort of learning the wrong things, I think, by following that as an example. Let me scroll back up here because I did see one other one that seemed to be a little bit of an outlier early on. Yeah, so hmm. So that was this one. Just kind of talking about Superpath. I'm gonna go and skip that one. I might we may find that, you know, Jimmy, you know, while you know he has sort of his own persona and all that stuff, you know, may not be the best for learning from directly on LinkedIn. We'll see. Give it a couple more minutes here, a couple more seconds scrolling. Oh, Oh, okay. Here's a good one. Here's a good one. Okay. Yep. Okay. So this is a good example, right? So Jimmy is talking about, kind of what he would focus on, and obviously, being somebody who is sort of in the center of a lot of conversations about content, content marketing. I think people really respect his opinion on stuff like this. So I think that's a good example for us to grab. Um, okay. I think we'll wrap up for Jimmy for now. Um, okay, let's actually. So we're already an hour in, believe it or not, uh, and we're still kind of wading through this first channel. So I want to accelerate the process a little bit here. So let me go ahead and switch back to my sheet. Um, Obviously, we could spend a lot more time digging into this research, and likely will spend more time, kind of off the camera here. But I want to make sure that we get through a decent amount of this actual content, or this actual process, rather than spending all of our time doing one thing. Okay, so the final step in this process, and again, the way that I generally break this down is kind of channel by channel. So I'm starting on LinkedIn. Next, we're going to look at podcasts. Then we're going to look at YouTube, communities, and newsletters. And in fact, I'll probably invert this slightly. I think communities are valuable. Obviously, I run a community. I am a fan, but we definitely know that podcasts, YouTube, newsletters were very frequent responses. Seem to be very high priority channels for this audience based on our conversations. So let's talk about LinkedIn really quick. The process that we want to do now, again, is we're just gonna kind of open up some of these, and again, what we're looking for is just like some general insights or some themes or some takeaways or some similarities. We're just trying to see kind of what is the what are some of the patterns, what's some of the signal in the noise, if you will. So I'm going to just go ahead and open up a bunch of these links, and we'll kind of flip through them together and look for a little inspiration that we can document here. So, this is certainly not a science. I would say it certainly leans more of an art, but we do want to look for as specific and sort of as scientific takeaways as they possibly can glean from something like this, despite being making a sort of like a qualitative and like anecdotal kind of exercise. So let's go through it. All right, so the first thing we've got is this. So let's kind of unpack this post really quick. So he's talking about some teams are stuck in 2010. It's a shame. And then the sort of format or the meat of the post is this um, graphic. Basically, the takeaway here is that, like, hey, content marketing is more than just one thing now. It's gotten more complex, and there's all these new channels and different things that you have to think about. I think so. I think I think this sort of this to me is sort of a validation kind of post, right? So I think that the folks who this tends to resonate with most are people who are sort of on, clearly on this side. They're sort of preaching for one reason or another that, hey, look, we should be doing content marketing differently. Like, if you're just doing blog posts, you're outdated. So I think this is sort of like a preaching to the choir kind of kind of approach. That would be my interpretation of that. Sorry, I'm just formatting up my sheet here. I screwed up my formatting while I was adding rows. uh, okay, so I'm adding that to my sheet here as kind of an insight. We'll kind of see, just like before, I think, or just like we did yesterday. I think the exercise here is see something, kind of make an observation, add it to the sheet, and then kind of try to validate it, or in some cases disprove it with additional evidence. So we're just going to kind of document stuff for now, and then we will kind of review stuff at the end. I don't know what to share. Here's some of the best content formats and ideas to do well on LinkedIn. Yeah, so I think this is a good one. I think this pairs well actually with like Jimmy Daly's thing, Jimmy Daly's post that we're just looking at. So let me kind of flip between these two. So this one, is basically, first of all, it's like very actionable, or at least it feels actionable. I don't know that's like super actionable because it's not teaching you exactly how to do something, but it's teaching you what to do. It's telling you like what to focus on, which I think is valuable for folks, right? So basically, the premise here is if you don't know, where to spend your time or what to focus on, here are some like ideas to like kind of get you started or to give you some direction, which I think is sort of a similar concept to this post from Jimmy Daly, where he's talking about, hey, if I ran SaaS content for a SaaS company right now, I'd focus on these two things: original research, sales enablement. So you can imagine maybe you are a content marketing leader at a SaaS company, but even if you aren't, you can imagine that uh, there's a lot of things changing right now. There's a lot of question marks about, where should I be focusing? How should I spend my budget? What's, sort of a good bet at this stage? And so what I'm hearing here in both of these posts is like, hey, there's a million options in front of you. You're not sure which sort of path to go down. Either here's sort of a macro view so that you can better choose an option that makes the most sense, or here are some specific places where you should focus. So I think um, the insight there, perhaps to glean from that, and we're sort of borderline getting on into like actual content ideas, but I think the concept here is like clarifying direction, options, or focus seems to be kind of a unifying theme amongst those posts, right? So again, just giving people some sense of like confidence about either the direction they're going, if they're maybe doing these things already, or the direction they should go if they're trying to make a decision like that right now. Let's flip back to our posts here. How to manage your time. The quality of features must be related to what you do with your time today. Okay, so this is interesting. Ross also kind of, I think, like breaks out of the bubble a little bit in terms of like focusing only on like content marketing and SEO. He does do posts like this, which I would characterize this as more of like a lifestyle, kind of productivity type of post. Kind of similar to some of the content that Justin Welsh shares. So I think that's an interesting insight in and of itself, which is that there is sort of this overlap probably between, I guess I should say, like, people don't only think about work, right? They also think about their life in general. And so creating content that sort of resonates on an emotional level with sort of the everyday struggles, maybe that don't only apply to their job, also valuable. Um, I think the overarching theme here. So first of all, I think this kind of fits into what we just talked about also, right? Which is that it gives people sort of some clarity and direction, right? So it's telling them, you know, if you're feeling a particular way, if you're feeling like you don't know how to manage your time, or you feel like your time is kind of getting away from you or whatever, here are some specific things, some specific actionable steps that you can take to try to improve that. Uh, I think the theme here, and maybe why this resonates particularly with a content and SEO kind of crowd, is overwhelm. We talked about this yesterday a little bit when we were going through our ICPs, but I think that's such a common and sort of persistent thing for content people. Content at the end of the day is sort of an endless process. There is no end. You can always create more content, and people are often expecting you to create more content than you possibly could. And so, at in a work setting, that creates a sense of overwhelm. I think that often spills into people's lives. I mean, not that other people aren't also busy, of course, but I think that sense of overwhelm often spills into other people's lives. I know I certainly feel that. I think about all the time. When I'm sitting around doing nothing or watching TV or whatever. Hey, I could be spending this time writing LinkedIn posts for next week, or writing a blog post, or filming a live stream, or whatever it is, right? So I think overwhelm is a common theme. I'm just gonna jot that down for now. It's not like the sharpest insight I've ever come up with, but I think it's worth exploring that further because I think that is sort of a common and sort of recurring theme here. Uh, and especially paired with the point that we just made, which is that people are feeling overwhelmed and they're looking for something that's going to kind of help alleviate that overwhelm. And I think that overwhelm manifests in many forms, both at work and in life. So that in and of itself is sort of almost like a brand pillar, if you will, of like sort of helping people alleviate overwhelm on various fronts. Let's get back to our posts here. Dave, again, I love this. Sort of snarky. It's called engagement. Find interesting people, follow them. Seems obvious. Uh, da, da, da. A couple quick thoughts on this. I'm not gonna jump into insights quite yet because I want to look at a couple other Dave posts to see if I find any more common threads. But a couple things that jump out to me about this post. One is again, it's sort of actionable and practical. Two, uh, there's sort of like an insight here, right? Which is that like the thing that seems obvious uh, as soon as you say it, right? Which is like, oh, when you're on social media, you should be social, right? You should engage with other people if you want them to engage with you. That seems extremely obvious, but you probably wouldn't have thought of that, right? Or whatever. So I think that's sort of part of the reason why it works. The other theme that I see here, which I think is sort of another interesting one, is that like sort of the return to humanity theme, right? So I think that a big part of Dave's appeal in particular is first of all that he has like a very distinct voice. He's not afraid to be kind of sarcastic and snarky and funny. So I think that already kind of sets him apart from a lot of other folks. But you can also tell that like part of what he is saying here is if you want other people to care about you, you have to care about other people. Basically, is what he's saying. And so I think that that's another interesting insight, and we'll see if that kind of carries through in any way, or we notice that pattern anywhere else. Mhm. So on first blush, I feel like that theme kind of applies here as well, right? You can see here, as we already talked about, this is kind of part of a thematic kind of series that Dave did about measurement and marketing and some of the challenges there and pitfalls. But what he's ultimately saying here is that like this is like a human process and you can't just like turn it into numbers on a spreadsheet, right? And so I think again the through line that I'm picking up on here is that like injecting humanity into marketing, and I think that really resonates with content people in particular in my opinion, in my experience, because I think content people tend to be overthinkers perhaps. They tend to uh sort of value like the art and the craft of content. A lot of content people are writers by trade, and so they sort of come from a background of maybe like literature or empathy for different people and different characters. And so I think having sort of that underlying like humanity is the thread. I think is sort of an interesting insight there. I'm gonna go ahead and jot that down 'cause I think that's again, I don't know if that's like the final insight there, but I think it's sort of worth documenting as a kind of potential valuable insight. So let me just fix my rows here once again because I can't function if my rows aren't right. driving me nuts already that these don't have my border on them. But um, all right. I think again could certainly refine that idea further, but I think like that's kind of worth cataloging here. Okay. I just had a couple other posts. We'll just fly through these really quick. I don't know if we're gonna learn a whole lot here, but let's take a look at Chris Walker. Um, hmm. Okay, so I would say the reason why this post seemed to resonate from looking at the comments, I think is sort of the uh the fact that it's like I guess you would consider this like a controversial take or like a hot take. Basically he's saying that like everyone is responsible for these metrics, which some people are saying like, hey, I agree, it's collaborative, that's great. Other people are saying like, hey, that's stupid, you're overthinking this. It's a that metric is the job of the sales team, whatever. Yeah, I mean, I guess like that's a fair insight here, which is for better or worse, I think on almost every social platform, some level of like divisive content. It doesn't have to be ultra divisive, but I think like having an opinion, being a quote unquote thought leader who like says something that maybe other people aren't willing to say or like whatever, can be a valuable approach, something to at least consider as we think about our strategy. I'm not saying that we're gonna be out here trying to divide the content marketing world with our content or anything like that, but worth keeping in mind that many of the most influential ideas, you know, tend to be divisive, right? They tend to have people who immediately are attracted to that concept and people who are immediately repelled by it. So worth keeping in mind, I think. Missed opportunities while you're publishing, others are publishing. Yeah, I mean, I would consider this post here from Justin Walsh, as we talked about before, kind of fits into that like rah like hustle bro kind of thing. Um, I don't love learning from this as a way to inform our content strategy, just because I feel like that is patently not our brand. If I were gonna sort of glean an insight here, I would say like the thing that I would maybe take away from this is more about kind of the structure and the presentation of the idea. So it's very punchy, it's very like skimmable. I think in general people tend to gravitate towards content like that, and especially I think people who are uh, kind of want the meat of it as fast as possible. So there's maybe something to glean there, but I'm not going to put anything on our sheet for now. Let me pull this back up and we'll talk about next steps. Okay, so we have gone through one channel. We have cataloged all of our creators or several creators. We've cataloged a bunch of content examples that we can kind of learn from that have kind of worked in this space. Interestingly, one of the things that I'm sort of surprised by is like, and maybe it's worth taking some time to sort of catalog some like negative insights, if you will, right? So the negative insight would be, something that we didn't see, right? Like what did we not see a lot of here in this audience? I would say like super specific frameworks, data, or case studies. Yeah, so sort of interestingly enough, I think the content that we found here, at least in these examples, now might be worth further validating this, but the content that we found in these examples tended to be more conceptual and I would say more tactical. So there wasn't a lot of like content about big picture kind of strategy thinking. Also tended to be, I would say, kind of more like emotionally resonant rather than rather than like logical, if you will. And that's not a criticism or anything. I'm just sort of categorizing the content as based on what we saw, right? Which is that there were we didn't really see any posts or any content here as standout content from what we found. And again, this is not comprehensive per se, but we didn't find any content that was like, here's hard data to back up the science of how to do something well, or here's a case study that shows exactly how to do this specific thing to achieve this specific outcome. Which you see that in a lot of circles, even in content marketing, especially in SEO. I think you tend to see more of those sort of like data driven kind of pieces. Whereas in this case, I think we tend to see more like, hey, you're feeling this way. Here's maybe a different way to think about this or a different way to approach it. So it's sort of going from like that kind of emotional pain point or that emotional experience and connecting that to some kind of action that you can take. So that's maybe how I would categorize this stuff. I think again, valuable as sort of an insight in and of itself, that just that kind of content seems to resonate most deeply with these audiences as our research found so far. Next channel we're going to talk about is podcasts. So we've got to do a little bit of work here because we don't have any podcasts that people mentioned explicitly. Actually, I don't think that's true. Where did we lose? Well, a couple of things that we can do here. So one is we know that a couple of these people have podcasts also, right? So we can sort of assume, I think it's fair to assume that if somebody is, for instance, learning from Lenny's newsletter, there's probably a pretty good chance that he's learning from that they're also potentially, or at least in the same audience as people who listen to Lenny's podcast or watch Lenny on YouTube. Again, I think Lenny does the repurposing kind of thing where he records it as a video and then distributes it as a podcast also. Same thing with Exit 5. I'm fairly certain, we'll have to double check on this, but I'm pretty sure Dave also has like a podcast or something that he does. Marketing Brew, I'm not sure if they have a podcast. I know Omniscient did have one for a while, but I'm not sure if they still do. I think they quit doing it because I was on that like years ago, but I haven't heard anything about it in a long time. Superpath definitely also does. Superpath, Jimmy Daly does his, I think it's called Content Briefly. Same kind of thing. I think they do like a video and then they repurpose it as a podcast or distribute it as a podcast. Okay, so same idea here. Basically, what we're going to do, we've got some creators that we want to explore. So now what we want to do is we want to look for kind of their outliers here. Let me just do some quick research here. If you're not familiar with Lenny, I never know how to pronounce his name. Let me pull up his page here and we'll see if I. Actually, I don't even know. Maybe he just quit using his last name because I think it's like, from what I recall, it's like somewhat challenging to pronounce. I think, yeah, I don't know where his name is. Anyway, Lenny is this guy. Let me share my screen here. So yeah, Lenny is this guy. From what I recall, he's like he was like the former head of growth or like marketing at several different companies. And he's kind of like pivoted as like a consultant and he does these great interviews with like, I would say kind of like A-list marketing leaders. So yeah, you can see some of the guests that he's got on here, right? Near Isle. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but he's written several like very famous books. We've got people from DoorDash. Yeah. Anyway, just a lot of really like big names talking about topics. I would say, um, yeah, I would say he does a really good job of kind of bringing on these like A-list folks and then talking with them. So let's go through same kind of process here. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to go through his catalog. We're going to look for any outliers of content that seem to perform particularly well, and then we'll repeat that process for some of the other shows, and then we will kind of do a review at the end to see if we find any insights there. So let's go ahead and just sort this by popular. The art of product management and how Netflix builds a culture of excellence. Okay, so one thing again that we're gonna have to do here is we're gonna have to do a little bit of filtering, right? Obviously, content isn't an island, but nevertheless, a lot of these topics are not particularly relevant to our specific audience, at least from like a content perspective, right? Most of many of these are like very just like entrepreneurship focused. Uh, okay, so here's one that's about SEO, so that's worth grabbing here. Are we okay? We're gonna flip this because we're on YouTube again. Technically, this is probably probably a lot of overlap here between the podcast and the SEO or YouTube, but grow the fastest growing SaaS startup ever. Interesting. Okay, we'll grab that. Just don't die. Okay, so actually, this is probably worth grabbing as well. So most of these are like one-to-one like interviews. This particular post, I think. Oh, actually, maybe I'm wrong. Sorry, I thought this was like a more of like a roundup, but I don't think it is. Founder of Cred, founder, author. Yeah, I mean, so interestingly enough, I would say, and I guess this makes sense for podcasts, right? So when we talk about LinkedIn, we talked about sort of actionable, tactical kind of content where it's like, hey, you're feeling this way. Here's some specific actions you can take. That seemed to resonate. In this case, we're talking about podcasts. Uh, I guess it makes sense that like you're having a conversation with someone in most cases, right? Most podcasts are like interview style. Uh, and so because of that, but sort of by its nature, it generally is going to be probably less tactical and more like strategic, right? So it's more like, hey, I'm just trying to like learn from what somebody else did and maybe get like a general sense of like what I should be thinking about rather than like here's a specific thing I should be doing. So I think that's maybe a key insight here is that like the podcast, the YouTube videos, these like especially again with this like interview sort of format tend to I think lend themselves to more of that like big picture, strategic, big outcomes. Sort of some of the stuff that was missing from the LinkedIn stuff that we talked about. So let's document that really quick because I think that's worth mentioning. Um, and once again, we're going to document this now. As we go through this, we might find sort of counter evidence. So we'll have to kind of decide if that's something that we want to hold as a true insight or not. Um, yeah. So I think that's the kind of thing that like you tend to learn. It's story driven, right? So story driven content where you're talking to somebody and you're asking them to kind of walk you through, their experience or like share their lessons. That kind of content, is generally not going to be super tactical at the level like that the LinkedIn posts were. It's not going to be like, okay, I opened Google Docs and I started writing and I wrote, like this or what, it's going to be like, no. Like the key takeaway from what I remember at that moment was that I was thinking about this or I was approaching it from this particular way or, our strategy had this particular quality to it. So yeah, I think that's worth noting there. My favorite interview questions, redefining success. Okay. Okay. I think we'll sort of leave it there. I mean, I think again, valuable from kind of an insight perspective to sort of get that takeaway. I don't see it again. I don't see this content mapping like super closely to the kind of content that we would create, just because it's so broadly about different topics related to startups, that it's not going to be super duper specific to relevant to our specific audience in many cases. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but yeah, valuable to kind of see Lenny's take there. Let's go over to exit 5. Let me see if I can find him on YouTube. Let me see. Someone got a podcast. Does he also cross post that to YouTube? Oh, I found a YouTube thing. Oh, maybe not. Hang on, sorry. tried to find this. Exit 5 podcast. Okay. So it looks like he does post it to YouTube, but I don't. Hang on. Okay. Yeah, he's got videos also. Okay. Sorry. I was trying to figure it out. It was taking me to the podcast. I forgot that YouTube now has like a podcast thing where you can specifically post your audio only content. Okay, so let's look at the videos that he's got. Let's look at our most popular. Okay. Boop. All right. So first of all, once again, I think we're gonna interesting. Okay, so one key takeaway right away is that this does not seem to be a core focus of Exit 5, right? You can see from the views that he doesn't get a ton of traffic to these videos. Still, nevertheless, we're sort of looking for the standouts as kind of our guiding star here, so we can maybe glean some insights there, even if the audience is smaller. I think a lot of people just listen to the podcast and don't actually watch the videos, so I think that's why. Anyway, the other thing I was going to say about this podcast about Exit 5 is, it is sort of marketing executive focused. So I think a big part of their audience is sort of, one level above our ICP. So, rather than a director of content or a head of content, they're the VP of marketing or the CMO or like, something at that level. So we'll want to, again, kind of apply a bit of a filter here as we're reviewing this. What makes a great VP of marketing? Creating LinkedIn posts, real-time feedback loops. Exit 5's first person event drive. Okay, so I'm going to grab this one because this is obviously the most relevant. Surprise, surprise. We've got our friend Ross, who was a guest here, talking about B2B content strategy. I think this is also good, right? Because sort of following on the theme or a variation on the theme that we just talked about, which is that this isn't, here's exactly how to use AI in your SEO. It's like, here's how you should be thinking about AI and SEO and content marketing and all of this stuff, right? So it's really big picture about like, here's sort of the macro trends and sort of the strategy. So that's actually maybe a good thing here. I'm gonna macro trends is maybe a good way to frame that. Okay. All right, I don't see a whole lot more here that's sort of worth diving into. Let me
come at me with the research. Here, this is Kara Hardin's perspective. Come at me with the research. Here, this is Kara Hardin's perspective. There's no right or wrong way in terms of.
Okay, so now I'm here. So I'm trying to see, LinkedIn ads and strategy for B2B, community building. So, I mean, these are the same content, but I'm just trying to see if there's any other like patterns. Actually, can I sort this by? I don't think I can sort it by views. So we're just gonna have to manually kind of scroll here. Yeah, so I'm not seeing any other like sort of standout, kind of outlier pieces here on the podcast side. Okay, so I think we're probably about wrapped up there. Let me really quick. I don't think we can see. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think we can see analytics on any of the other podcast platforms. So Google Podcast is no longer available. That's helpful. Let's see. Can we see it on Spotify? Yeah, I don't think we can see it. It's like see any analytics about it or anything. So I don't know. We wouldn't be able to see like, okay, this is the most popular episode. I don't think. Um, so it's not super helpful for us to look at it on any of these other platforms. Let me just put one more here, which is Apple Podcasts. Why is this in like a foreign language? Why is it in like Dutch? That's weird. Okay. Yeah, these are all just chronological. Okay. So unfortunately, yeah, we're not going to really glean any insights from any of these other platforms. It seems like in terms of like what's the most popular. So we'll just move on to the next thing. We did, again, I think we learned a little bit of sort of insight there about um, what tends to work there. Let's go to the Super Path podcast here. So they've got, I believe it's called Content Briefly. Okay, so I think I lost my screen share, didn't I? Sorry about that. Okay, so let me just pull this up here. First of all, let me check this Overcast and see if that's potentially can tell us anything. No, you have to log into Overcast. Okay, then let's go. Let's actually go back. Is this on YouTube? Yes. Okay, so we can go to their YouTube. What's up, Jimmy? All right, so same thing as before. We're going to look at this content strategy for B2B SaaS companies hosted by Militia and Minutia. Sorry, Militia. Minutia. Took me a second there. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Content editor at Gorgeous, e-commerce, content specialist at Simple Strat, reusable content templates. Okay. So interestingly, this is sort of a counterfactual to our previous insight, right? So you can see here that, well, potentially a counterfactual, I should say. Like some of these specific posts, like how to build a functional marketing plan in Airtable and how to manage a content calendar in Todoist, are very tactical pieces of content, right? It's not that high level. It's not strategy. It's not a macro trend. It's a very specific, tactical, actionable piece of content. Here's how to do a thing. Yeah, sort of worth noting, perhaps, that yeah, there's maybe some evidence to the contrary. Nevertheless, if we look at this, I don't know what exactly this covers, but you can tell, this is their most popular piece. It's a high level, here's sort of a framework or an overview of like what you should be thinking about. So I think I'm going to grab that as a prime example. My hunch is that where do we go? Okay. My hunch is that, again, if we want to think about, why am I like sort of by least popular? That's weird. Okay. But my hunch is that some of this, this tactical content, while, it is valuable for certain people, my guess is that it probably gets more of this traffic from like search because it is tactical. People are finding it that way rather than like it's resonating with the audience of Superpath being, more strategic at a strategic level. One of the interesting things. So I don't know what these are. These just appear to be like interviews. So content specialist, content editor, content marketing manager at LogRocket. Let me just look at what this is really
Let's
quick.
do it. All right. So I'm here with Brian Neville O'Neill, head of content at LogRocket. Brian, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Jimmy?
Pretty good. We're here today to chat about a new role that you're hiring for, a content marketing manager role.
Okay, so this is a job post, interestingly enough. So he's talking to him about a job that he's hiring for, which I guess makes sense that would get a lot of views because people are, people are always trying to get hired and get new jobs. So that makes sense. So let's talk about this next one: how to create reusable content templates and gather content. Okay, so I think that's worth documenting. That's kind of, in my opinion, sort of sits at that intersection between. I would say it sits at the intersection between kind of strategic and tactical, right? Because you're thinking about, most people are thinking about reusable content templates or repurposing things like that as sort of a strategic device, meaning that like I can create more content, I can move faster, I can get more value from the content that I'm creating. But obviously, there's like the tactical execution piece of it, which is how do I actually do that? How do I put that into practice? And so maybe that's sort of a thing that we can also glean from this in terms of the content that works here. We said already, we're going to focus on big picture outcomes, strategy, overall framework, macro trends, maybe bridging that, right? So like bridging ideal outcomes with tactical implementation. I still don't think this content, this format of these channels are going to be particularly great necessarily for like, actually teaching someone how to do the thing. But to get like a basic process of like, okay, we had this goal, we wanted to, 10x our content output or, whatever the goal might be. And then here are sort of the steps that we took to get there. I think that's kind of where this content really fits into the strategy. Because again, just based on the format and the structure, like it's going to be really hard to teach somebody like tactically how to do a thing. I mean, yes, I could record like an over the shoulder video of me like doing something and teaching you how to do it. But I don't think that content is going to resonate as well with this audience because I think ideally they are looking to get out of some of that day to day, right? They're looking to have more time and space and energy to focus on strategy and thinking and planning. And so I think they're less interested in content that's focused on tactical execution, step by step using Asana or Todoist or Airtable or whatever. Secondly, it doesn't, it certainly doesn't make for a compelling podcast. So, especially if we're looking to kind of repurpose this content across these two different channels, I think, we're going to want to create content that kind of works in both formats. And, most people, unless they're sitting down to do a thing, they probably aren't going to be compelled to watch a video, right? Like, unless I'm looking specifically for information about how to build my calendar in Airtable, and I'm trying to do that right now, I'm probably not just going to like see that on my LinkedIn feed and click that video and watch it because I don't have any way to apply that knowledge right now. So I still think our general North Star here is like focus on macro trends, focus on big picture outcomes, and then kind of blend that into some tactical implementation. So don't make it so high level that there's nothing valuable in it. But don't try to get so in the weeds that we're like teaching somebody step by step how to like set up Asana or whatever. I think that's maybe the key takeaway here. I'm probably not, for the sake of time, we're already 2 hours in, so I'm probably not going to spend a lot of time on podcasts. As we just have already talked about, I think podcasts overlap pretty heavily with YouTube. Most of these, first of all, the main creators that we're focused on here are the same. Second of all, the podcast is the same content for the most part as the YouTube channel. So from sort of a content and like strategy perspective, I don't think it's worth spending a ton of time focusing on the podcast explicitly. Also, we can't really get great analytics on like what their most popular podcast episodes are. So I think YouTube is going to be our best proxy for sort of the content that works on these channels or these formats. Okay, the final thing that we will talk about is the newsletter. Before we get into that, I am going to take just a quick break. So I'm going to pop off for 2 minutes here, use the restroom, grab a soda. If you're joining me live, I see a couple people are at least tuned in here. pop it in the comments while I'm away. Just let me know who's joining me. Let me know if you have questions before we dive into newsletters next. All right, I'll BRB. All right, I'm back, ready to get into it. Real quick, by the way, I just want to mention I am going to be sharing this template just like I did yesterday. So if you're not already, pop over to LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'll be posting kind of a recap post from today's stream. And along with that, you just have to drop a comment and I'll send you the link to grab your copy of this research template if you'd like one. So yeah, watch out for that on LinkedIn after today's stream is over. Okay, let's get back into it. So we're talking about newsletters. Repeating the same process basically, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to go to Lenny's newsletter. Let me find Lenny's newsletter. Oh, I finally found Lenny's last name. Still not sure how it's pronounced. Rachitsky? Yeah, maybe. Okay, so here's Lenny's newsletter. It's a Substack. Yeah, let's look at it. Okay, so thank you very much for Substack. They've got top podcasts here. Or I'm sorry, not top newsletter. So we can get a sense right away of sort of what the top performers are. Biggest consumer guide, got their first 1,000 users. First of all, as we can see here, the content here once again is a little scattered. I don't mean that as a criticism or anything, but it's certainly not content marketing focused, right? So we've got to kind of parse through this and maybe find some insights about the content itself, as far as like what resonates with content leaders and why they might read this podcast, or I'm sorry, this newsletter, even if the content is not explicitly about content marketing. Certainly, I think anything that has to do with like, growth or growing, pretty much every business in the world is trying to grow. So I think anything that's like focused on that is probably valuable. So I'm going to grab this Duolingo case study here. You should be playing with GPTs at work. Okay, so I mean, I think that's that's kind of the curiosity gap kind of angle where again, people are thinking about GPT and AI and that kind of stuff, and they're not really sure how they should be using it per se. So kind of trying to learn from what other people have done or are doing. How the first consumer apps got their first 1,000 users. I'm not going to bother with that one because that's again like most going to be I think most relevant to earlier stage businesses than what we're looking for. How to use chat again, so kind of thing, same idea here. I mean, maybe there's like a practical application here, but there's been a million posts written about how to use ChatGPT for writing or content, right? I don't think that would be super valuable. I think the reason why this works is because people have probably not thought about it in terms of like product management. So that's why this is sort of a unique take. This one I really like. So Magic Loop. So let's just look at this really quick. Oh, interesting. This is written by someone else. I didn't even know you could do that. So the magic loop, the steps: do your current job well, ask your manager how you can help them, do what they ask your manager if you could. So I think this is kind of the perfect mix. And I think actually the more I think about this, the more I feel like if we think about our strategy most broadly, LinkedIn and social is great for sort of building your audience. I think a podcast, YouTube is good for, sort of, I would say like top of the funnel, like sort of strategic kinds of topics where we're thinking about the big picture problems and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, but we're not getting super in the weeds because again, that sort of format just doesn't really lend itself to that. And then the newsletter, I think, is where we can really get, sort of really pull the through line on that and say, okay, you started with this feeling, you identified this problem, and now here's some like tactical implementation about how to solve it or to resolve that issue. So I think this is a key example, right? This is both a framework and execution, right? It's giving you the big picture. Hey, here's what we're trying to do. You're trying to achieve this specific outcome. Here's what the big picture looks like for how to do that. And then here's like sort of step by step an actual process to implement that for yourself. So I think the beauty of the newsletter, and I think the reason why people are attracted to it is because it's sort of, it's in a more confined space. It's not in your feed where you're, a million other things are competing for your attention. Obviously, your inbox is messy too, but I know, a lot of people read newsletters sort of separately from their other emails. And so I think it gives people more space to sort of follow that narrative all the way through and really learn something that they can apply and sort of see that through line. So I think that's maybe a takeaway here. I'm not going to jot that down quite yet, just because I want to kind of further validate that. But I think as we look at the other successful newsletters, I think that's one of the things that we'll see here is that, that's just sort of the part of the magic of newsletters. The 10 commandments of salary negotiation. I think this is again kind of following the same idea, right? You've got this graphic that's kind of giving you like the big picture overview, and then you've got sort of details about that, right? So read between the lines, but then how do I actually do that? How do I implement that? I think that probably applies here to some of these like growth things as well. I love this. Decision-making frameworks, right? So again, we're sort of bridging the gap between like a framework or a strategy and execution, which I think is really awesome. Yes. Okay. That's Lenny's newsletter. Again, I want to kind of validate that hypothesis a little better by looking at some of these other ones, but that's where I'm feeling it right now. Let me pull up Exit 5 and their newsletter next. I'm not sure if they have okay, so here's previous editions. Mm. let me open this up. I don't know if they are using anything. Today's brought to you by Paul. Okay, so I don't know if there's a way for us to sort these by most popular. Let me try something a little tricky here. Okay, sorry. So what I'm trying to do, trying to use my Google operators here to see if I could better sort these. Interestingly, when I search for newsletters on Google on Exit5, I only get three of them, and I'm not sure why the other ones aren't being indexed or aren't appearing here. But nevertheless, I think we can learn a little bit about kind of the general structure here from these. So let's just dive into them. Okay, so this edition of the newsletter, what makes a brand? One second, I'm gonna open up my Diet Coke here. Okay, so this is an ad. So we're going to talk about branding. Your brand is your reputation. Brand encompasses. Okay, so yeah, this is definitely a little bit of a different format than Lenny's newsletter, right? So I would say this is kind of like a hybrid newsletter, right? So you can see here that there's sort of like a short essay, if you will, about this particular topic, which is brand and sort of the value of brand. And then there's kind of like a curated selection of additional resources to learn more. So, it's a little bit of like original content, but it's mostly like sort of a curated or like a repurposing strategy where they're sort of sending folks to check out these podcasts. Sorry, one second. Excuse me. Sending people to check out these podcasts, and then it looks like if there is sort of a relevant event, they would be posted here, etc. So yeah, I think again, kind of an interesting takeaway here. Let's just look at some of these others and see if it kind of follows the same format. So this one, community is the #1 B2B marketing trend. Okay, so yeah, so this is kind of like I'd say this is kind of like a medium take, right? It's not like a short takeaway like you would post on LinkedIn, where you're just like, quick little quip or like a single tip kind of thing. It's sort of one level deeper than that, but it's not quite a deep dive like Lenny's newsletter, right? So Lenny's newsletter would, go into much more detail about, how to develop your community or how to build the community, etc. So yeah, worth considering how those two contrast. Hmm. Interesting. So this is, yeah, I'm not sure how you would characterize. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like just like an anecdote. Yeah, it's interesting use of an email newsletter. I think like it's just it does, I guess, in a way it does kind of mirror some of the content that you might find on like a LinkedIn, like a long form LinkedIn. It's got kind of some of those same elements. There's like a little bit of like a hook. There's kind of like a storytelling element, some other stuff. Let me go back here to the catalog of newsletters and just take a look, see if there's anything. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm seeing, so first of all, I should, just for context, I don't have any way to sort these by like popularity or anything like that, so I don't necessarily know like which of these resonated the best. But just looking at this, I think perhaps the Exit 5 newsletter has moved into a direction that's more like Lenny's newsletter. So let's just take a look at this. Partner Marketing 101. Okay. Channel partnerships, tech partnerships, strategic partnership. Yeah, okay. So yeah, if I had to characterize this, right, I would say, again, it's still a little bit of a hybrid, but I think, this content here, sort of the meat of this newsletter, is a little closer to what you would see in like Lenny's newsletter, where there's like sort of a big picture, hey, there's these, channel or partner marketing is important. Here are like sort of 3 different types of partner marketing you should be thinking about. And then there's like a little bit of like tactical implementation, like how does this actually work in practice? So I think, from looking at that example, I think we're getting a little closer to sort of convergence there with what we're seeing in the Lenny newsletter. Let's look at this one. When you want to blame sales, do this instead. So the formatting is a little weird here. I don't know why this is like seems to be like missing line breaks or something, but so and I would say this is certainly, I don't think the execution here is quite as good as Lenny's newsletter. No offense to Dave or the Exit 5 team. I think also part of that's just because this like weird formatting stuff with the how this is archived, but yeah, so you can see, sort of starts with like a premise, has a little bit of like a narrative, then there's a framework. Again, it's not particularly well presented here based on this formatting. I think this, this could be a lot more clear. But there's like a framework with like some execution details about, okay, hey, work together to find a solution, be prepared. I would say it's not quite as in depth as something that I might find on like in Lenny's newsletter. So something to take away from there, to take away from that. I'm going to go ahead and grab this one as an example, because I think this is sort of close to some of the stuff that we might cover, right? So, I don't think we would necessarily talk about community marketing, but we might talk about, how does content work within a community or something like along those lines. So I'm going to drop that back in my sheet here as an example. And then I'm going to go through just a couple more of these really quick, and then we're going to move on because we've got some other ones to do your best. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, again, this is pretty high level, but it does, I think the crux of this newsletter is that it's sort of bridging the gap a little bit. I would say maybe not quite to the extent of the Lenny newsletter, but it is sort of bridging the gap between big picture, framework, strategy, and actual execution. Like, here's actually some things that you can do in your first 5 days on the job. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's look at the next newsletter. Marketing Brew. This person said that they no longer find this newsletter to be as valuable as it used to be. So we'll see what we find. All right. Oh, I closed my screen share again. Sorry about that. Let me share once again. Okay, Marketing Brew. Interesting. Okay, so this is obviously very broad. So they cover a lot of stuff in Marketing Brew and the various brew newsletters. Let me just see here. I don't see. I'm trying to see if there's a way for me to sort by like most popular. I don't see that. Let me click here real quick and see. No. Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, let's look at this editor's picks, maybe as sort of a proxy for what might be more popular. Early reports find Google's inside Prime Video's consumer products licensing strategy for Olympic activations. Brands are turning to platforms beyond broadcast. Okay, so Marketing Brew is definitely kind of its own beast, right? This is not, sort of your Substack brand of newsletters. It is more of like sort of a media newsletter, right? It's news, basically, as the name might imply. It does seem to be more like news oriented, right? So what's happening? Let's see kind of how deep they go on any on execution, or is it just sort of like reported stories? Okay, so here they're getting to kind of the like there's the story. Now they're getting to kind of the takeaways. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't sort of, this story in particular, it doesn't sort of pivot into any kind of like education or anything. It's just sort of news. It's just sort of straight news, if you will. Let's look at this inside Prime Video's consumer products licensing strategy. Okay, so this feels like it's going to be more like sort of takeaway or like educational focused. So let's see. Hmm. Okay, so there's a little bit of it, right? There's a little bit of like, there are some takeaways here or some insights or some lessons to be learned. I think if you kind of read between the lines, or sort of extrapolate from what is shared here, but the content itself is certainly not like, it doesn't feel like it's teaching you how to do something, right? It definitely doesn't feel like it's like an educational piece that's like teaching you a framework or showing you how to execute on something. It's definitely more just sort of straight news. Let me look at this really quick. So this is sort of like I assume like an interview. Yeah, so this is kind of like an interview. I don't think we're going to learn a lot from Marketing Brew, to be honest with you. Just looking at their content, like, I think it just serves like a totally different purpose. It is sort of more of like a pure media play, pure, kind of news and like reporting. It doesn't really get into, from what we're seeing here, it doesn't really seem to get deep into um, sort of practical takeaways or like actionable things for marketers. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the next one, which is Elena's growth scoop. Let us check out Elena. I'm gonna go ahead and flip over here. Look at that. I remembered to change my screen share before I close my tab. Okay. Most popular. Thank you, Substack, once again. Okay, so my Substack journey. Why I quit full-time roles. B2B product-led sales guide. Let's go there. Why I'm unquitting. So quit, and then she unquit. That was interesting. Growth at Dropbox. Okay, let's take a look at these. B2B product-led sales guide. Oh, shoot. She really limits what you can see, huh? Let's look at the next one. Let's just kind of see what we can glean here without being paid subscribers. Sorry, Elena, we're reading your content for free. Okay, so this is basically about how Dropbox structures their growth team. So that's kind of interesting. All right, the next one doesn't have anything that we can read. Okay, so I would say, this one, we can't really get a whole lot of the context of exactly how detailed this content goes, but we can see that it does also kind of follow a similar pattern to what we saw in Lenny's newsletter, where there's sort of a premise and like a setup, and then there's like a framework or like a steps or tactics or whatever, and then detail about how to execute them, right? So do profiling, and then what does it look like? How do you do that? What technology do you use? I'm assuming are sort of the questions that would be answered here. So again, I feel like feel free to correct me or chime in if you feel differently from what you're seeing here, but it feels to me like the best use case for a newsletter is sort of bridging between. Let me flip my screen here so you can see what I'm working on. Bridging between strategy, frameworks, and execution, right? So getting to that tactical level, right? So if we think about sort of, the funnel or the buyer journey or however you want to frame that, I think this is where we're sort of getting into like more middle of the funnel, like the meat of like how to do the stuff, how to do the thing. What does this actually look like in practice? Whereas the other channels that we've talked about, I think, are more about just generating awareness and kind of building your audience, grow, sort of empathizing with some of the challenges and the problems and the pain points as a way to kind of build awareness and affinity. And then these feel more like, perhaps unsurprisingly, right? I mean, I think a lot of people consider like a newsletter or an email to be, deeper in the funnel than like a LinkedIn post. And I think we're sort of validating that in a way here, but valuable to sort of see the data and kind of see how that plays out in real time. Let's take a couple more minutes here and go through Omniscient. Quick shout out to those guys. Let me see if I can pull this up. Okay, so yeah, so here's their field notes. Okay, so just at a quick glance, this does seem to be, I would say, goal oriented or sort of conceptual, right? The topics that they're covering, just looking at the thing, right? So, is SEO dead? I don't know what this is. Content algo user. My love letter to McDonald's and effective content operations, navigating the organic traffic landscape, surround sound SEO. So, it's sort of introducing like a concept or like an idea, and then we'll have to see, here, for instance, right? It's like a goal. It's like goal oriented. Like there's an outcome that you might want to achieve, right? Which is like upping your team's editorial quality standards. Let's look at that. Hire people smarter than you and get out of their way, people say. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, again, I think what we're seeing here is that the takeaway from this, perhaps, let's come back here to our sheet, right? Which is that, as we said, right, we're bridging between strategy, frameworks, and execution. As we just saw in that Omniscient newsletter, kind of follows that same pattern, right? Here's a thing that you're trying to achieve. Here's sort of a general outline of like how you get there, and then here's some like executional details about what that looks like in practice. So we're sort of moving people through the process here. Let's again sort of do like the negative insight, right? So what's the thing that we haven't seen here, right? We looked at Lenny's newsletter, Exit 5, Marketing Brew, Elena's Growth Scoop, Omniscient. We haven't looked quite yet at these other ones, but I would say the main thing is it's not sort of purely a roundup, right? This isn't, a newsletter that you get where it's just like links to articles or whatever, right? There's sort of substantive content in the newsletter itself, which I think is super valuable. It's one thing, one sort of maybe key takeaway here is that it's not like it's not based on the interviews, right? So for instance, Lenny and Exit 5 have these podcasts that they're doing where they're, conducting interviews with people one-on-one and then repurposing that content. While Exit 5 did link to some of those podcast episodes as sort of additional resources, the substance of the newsletter itself didn't appear to be like, here's a transcript or an excerpt from our interview, right? So it's not based on interviews directly, or some of the other like negative insights here. We really only saw one so far. I would guess, I haven't looked at it yet, but I mean, I'm not a subscriber to Search Engine Journal newsletter, but my assumption would be that the Search Engine Journal newsletter is sort of similar to Marketing Brew. It's like it's just sort of like a feed of the stories that are published on the website. And so it's sort of like news focused. So two out of the, how many is that? Six? Two out of the eight? Seven. Sorry, I can't count very well. 2 out of the 7 are sort of like feeds with like news, and the rest are like long form content. So I think the takeaway there is like it's long form content wins, right? Like, yeah, I mean, because the other thing to keep in mind is like from an execution perspective, we're not a media organization. We're not going to write news stories, and we're not going to send out an email every week. Probably that's, just the latest news that's happening. Even if we did, it would probably be lower value than just subscribing directly to the companies that report that news. So, yeah, I'm going to say, it's not, let's just add this as its own thing. News, news is its own brand of newsletter. Let's just say that, right? I think that's a fair takeaway there. Not that we couldn't do that per se, but it's if we had to bucket these two strategies, that they are separate and divergent strategies. I'm trying to think if there's any other sort of big picture insights here from the content itself. I think that kind of captures it. Okay, I think that puts us in a good spot. Honestly, we didn't get a chance to dig into communities. This would be an interesting one to spend more time on. Honestly, I don't have access to all of these. I am a member of Superpath, and obviously I run top of the funnel, so I'm a member there. From what I've seen though, and I'm not a paying member of Superpath, so maybe there's different content behind the paywall there. But from what I've seen, there's not like a lot of like sort of community native content being shared by other people besides the creators. But that would be an interesting thing to explore. It would be a strategy for creating like native content for communities as sort of part of this funnel. I mean, obviously there's like a play here to like repurpose your content or cross promote it or whatever, but there's probably an even better strategy where you're creating that like native content for communities specifically as a way to kind of serve some part of the business goal. So I think that's probably worth exploring, but since we're running out of time today, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today. We'll maybe pick that back up in the coming days here as we start to map out our strategy. One thing I'll mention here also is that we worked, other than, when we did LinkedIn, we took our starting list of creators, and then we did some additional supplemental research to expand that list. We did not do that with YouTube. We did not do that with newsletters. We did not do that with podcasts. We certainly could, and we certainly should probably do that, right, to get a better, more full picture, right? We started with kind of a limited list, and then just use those as our examples. But for instance, same kind of general concept as what we did with LinkedIn, using, for instance, the algorithm to look at suggested channels that appear alongside, Lenny, for instance, or content that appears alongside Lenny's most popular episodes. So here, look, I'll just pull this up as a quick.
A lot of times an over-resource ad.
Okay, so if we look over here, you can see all of my random videos with like random music playing and stuff. But you can see here, maybe related is the best one. So you can see, I tried 97 SEO strategies, the truth about podcast SEO, host all your AI locally. I don't know what that is about. But you can see some of the other creators in the space that are also popular and have created, sort of related content. So, you could, again, go further in this analysis to find more insights, right? So like here's Wes McDowell. He's obviously a big creator. If you're not familiar with him, he makes a lot of content in the space. So you could kind of repeat that same process, go in here, look his channel,
smart service business,
look at his videos, see his most popular, boom, 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 right? You can get additional insights here. So again, we didn't have time to kind of go all the way down that rabbit hole for each of these channels. But I would say overall, if you're conducting this process, this process for yourself, if you're conducting this research, spend even more time here going down these rabbit holes, exploring additional creators so that you can get more data points on the content that works. And that's going to lead to better insights about how you should shape your own content strategy. All right. I will hop off my soapbox there. But let's talk real quick about tomorrow. Well, actually, let's pull up our sheet here. We haven't checked in on my my plan for the day in a while. Okay, so we researched additional profiles matching the ICP. We used the LinkedIn algorithm to identify more. We identified some additional creators and brands. Then we reviewed the individual creators, cataloging, content inspiration, and finally we generated content insights. So we did all of our stuff for today. That's good. Tomorrow, problems, goals, strategy. So now we're going to really, sort of start translating all of this stuff that we've been researching and compiling into an actual strategy. Tomorrow is probably my favorite day because we're going to open up the strategy canvas, which let me just pull that up once again to kind of give you a preview of what we're going to be working on. Okay, so the content strategy canvas is where, again, we're kind of pulling all this stuff together into a framework where we can see kind of the macro view of how are we supporting these different functions? How are we using the different channels? How are we going to measure success? More importantly, what we're going to focus on tomorrow is defining the key problems that we're trying to actually solve at each stage in the funnel. So affinity, tofu, mofu, bofu, retention. There's generally going to be like one key problem. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means tomorrow, but basically, what's the problem that we're trying to overcome here from a marketing perspective? Number two, we're going to figure out the goal. So what are we actually trying to achieve here? At this stage, we don't have to get like super duper specific. It's not like a SMART goal with like a specific number, but just at a high level, what's the goal we're trying to achieve to support brand marketing at this particular stage? And then what's the strategy to do that? So here's where we'll get into kind of like the philosophical concept of strategy, right? I think, again, a lot of people think about strategy as like a checklist of tactics, or they think of strategy as like, oh, here's all the information about my ICP and like the channels and stuff like that we've already talked about. Yes, that is part of the strategy, but really a strategy should be a guiding principle, right? So like, how are we solving this problem in order to achieve this goal in this particular context? And that should be sort of a clear articulation of like what we're actually trying to do here. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to be long. It could be one sentence. It should be a guiding principle about what we're trying to achieve. So that's what we're going to develop tomorrow: problems, goals, strategies. And then after that, on Thursday, we're going to dig into channels, metrics, and tactics. So we'll get into the weeds there. Tomorrow, though, as I said, we'll dive into this content strategy canvas. As a wrap up for today, a couple quick final notes. Number one, if you haven't already, join Tofu. Oh, hey, Robert, sorry, I'm just seeing your message here. Yes, this is recorded. You can click the same link to watch this recording at your convenience. If you're not already a member of Tofu, join us over there. We've got almost 4,000 members. Join tofu.co. It's 100% free Slack community. It's a great place for freelancers, writers, content people, SEO folks, whether you're a freelancer or a solopreneur or an agency owner or an in-house marketer. We'd love to have you there. So join us there, jointofu.co. Once again, 100% free. Number two, find me on LinkedIn if you'd like to get copies of our our templates that we're working on this week. So yesterday, I posted the recap post for our persona research. I shared this buyer persona template. If you want this template, go find that post on my LinkedIn. All you have to do is drop a comment and I'll send it to you. If you want a copy of today's template where we conducted our channel research, I'm going to be posting a recap about that right after the stream. So I'll post that. It'll be the same thing. You just drop a comment and I will send you a copy of this template. So would love to send that your way. And then finally, I will mention the content strategy canvas. This will be dropping tomorrow after the live stream. I'll share this. So if you want a copy of this canvas here to kind of map out your entire content strategy across all your functions and channels and across the entire buyer's journey in one central place, you can grab that tomorrow. First of all, join me on the live stream where we'll work through it, and then look for the recap post on my LinkedIn afterwards to drop that comment, and you'll be able to get your copy of that as well. Okay, y'all. Well, I'm going to wrap things up here. So we're 2.5 hours in. We've got a pretty good batch of research and some key insights, I think, that are going to translate about goals and strategies and channels tomorrow. So I'm really excited to jump into the content strategy canvas. Thank you all once again for joining me. If you have not already, follow me on LinkedIn. Find me there. Would love to connect with you. And also, yeah, I guess we'll see. I'll see you tomorrow on the live stream. Thank you again. Have a great day and see you soon. Cheers.